Welcome. Living Spec is a modern way for product teams to collaborate. That means a lot of things. For me, it starts out with a collection of documents or a document, and each document contains users, files, tasks, pages that allow your team to collaborate frictionlessly. In general, I find that there are a lot of problems with creating products today. Some of them can be classified as engineering doubt. The sort of classic problem is, what am I building and why? Sounds easy, sounds simple, not often the case. In fact, often the biggest source of frustration for teams getting things done efficiently and on time. Many times you sit down to write something or create some block of code, and you realize that the details feel wrong. You don't know who to ask. You're missing information. You're wondering if this is the old version of the spec, if it reflects the conversation you had last week, if it reflects your most recent updates. And other times you're like, hey, where do we have that conversation again? Because I don't remember. Was it in Slack, Zoom, in a task system? Is this the correct document? Has everyone actually read this spec? Do they agree with this? And what am I building? Is it going to be correct or not? And then what happens if I make this change? What might I break? What might be similar? And lots of tools exist on the market that try to solve some of these problems, but we find that they're more like chores. They're kind of tedious. And what happens is they end up turning into dead specs, hence the name Living Specs. Living Spec, of course. And we want things to be as frictionless as a Google Doc or a Word document, but do a lot more for us. And we don't want things to turn into, the chores that we typically find. And what happens oftentimes in product creation is we end up just doing the chores, taking out the trash, those sorts of things. So Living Spec creates this live collaborative document system. It contains a lot of features. It integrates with various task systems and tools like Slack. And we're extremely focused on making it easy to add information and not worrying about if it's perfect. It is the biggest friction to writing things down is to actually just write them down in a way that people can see and share. We hope to create a fairly non-judgmental system. So, the assumption is, hey, it's better to write something down than to not write it down at all. It's better to iterate than to worry about perfection on step one. And so we don't assume that we know the right structure for you. We just know that if we give you some nice building blocks for collaboration, that things should work well. So for example, we want it to be super easy to link things together. We want it to be easy to find the information that you have. And we want it to be easy for you to connect all the dots in what you're doing. So I have a few example specs here. This one is for the current game Wordle, which is really popular. And the idea is just, hey, if I was to create Wordle and Wordle didn't exist, what might I do? And so I might start to design some ideas and come up with this idea. And I might define some priorities and try and do this in a way that's digestible for people to read. So I'm not trying to create walls and walls and walls of text that people will ignore, but I'm trying to create short, digestible blocks that are easy to link together. I might start to turn different things into tasks or pages. So maybe this is its own thing and I need to expand on this. So I can convert this into a new page. I can go to that page. I can say, hey, I need to define this as a set of features, right? And maybe I turn that into a task. And now I've got this task. And I can go in and I can give it a priority. I can assign it to myself. I can I can give it a due date. I can do all the sorts of things you'd expect to do without losing the context of the area in which I'm working. I can start to define variants as Wordle takes off, so I can explore one of my favorites, which is Worldle, right? When Worldle gives you access to sort of, you pick a country rather than picking a word, and gives you various hot and cold guesses. And in each case, we're trying to just lightly define how it works. Now, this isn't necessarily enough detail to build a product, and that's okay. You start somewhere, and eventually you end up with details that are specific enough, and that's kind of when you know it's time to hand things off to an engineer. One of my son's favorite games is Among Us. It's a game that's pretty lightweight and easy to play. And they recently worked on a new friends list feature, and they kind of shared this publicly. So I'm working on just a pseudo spec for how you would create a friends list in Among Us. And they have this sort of they define publicly just a few of the things they are working on and how to do them. And then what you would do is you'd go in and say, oh, a unique friend code, generate a unique code for each friend. Well, what does that mean? Is it a UUID? Is it human typable? You need to decide which it is, right? and I don't even know how to spell typable, so that's kind of funny, right? Anyway, the point is there are lots of different ways you can define a spec. A spec could be as simple as like the original iPod, 1,000 songs in your pocket, 10 hours of battery life, and you start there. And you realize suddenly you have a lot more things you need to do to support that. You need to be able to add those songs to your device. You need to be able to listen to them. You need to support metadata for artists. You need to support an MP3 format. What is an MP3 format? This actually started out as a spec and it evolved into a page because there was so much discussion and conversation that happened around it. So we don't assume to know like the right format in which you might structure things, but instead we try to make it really easy to move things around. So what that effectively does is we could go in here, say, hey, we've had like this conversation, we've had some, useful insights here, right? That's easy enough. You know, and we decide, oh, wow, like, this actually needs to be a spec on its own. So we can evolve a task to a page, boom. Now this has turned into a page. It's captured our notes. It has a reference to the original task. But the idea is we don't want to lose or bury interesting insights in a task. We want to elevate them to a part of our spec that people will read, and then we can connect them together. Maybe the some useful insights, oh, I'm like being ridiculous here, becomes its own spec page, and maybe we have to provide interesting information there. There are lots and lots and lots of different things you can do in Living Spec. You can embed media, you can do all sorts of rich text editing details, you can sort of view various dashboard interfaces, you can view bookmarks, you can view all the files that have been uploaded, you can integrate with different task systems or with chat interfaces or other things like that. You can create reusable snippets. I'm just going to move on to that. You can create reusable snippets that let you sort of create like a milestone update for your plan or for whatever really you need to do. You can also see invites. We have a live synchronization mode. You can invite people to documents. Obviously, this is way too much content for one short video, but the hope here is that I'm going to start creating smaller and smaller videos showing one feature at a time. So thank you for listening. I hope you enjoy Living Spec and let us know if you have any questions or feedback.